Legislative Day number 5 will now come to order. Please pause for a moment of silent meditation. I'll now call upon Councilman Young, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag, States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the journal of the meeting of February the 21st, 2020?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. The journal is approved. Enrollment of bills. Bills 3-23, 4-23, 5-23, and 6-23 were passed by the council, signed by the executive, and hereby enrolled. Mr. Secretary, we now read all bills for introduction this evening.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. There's only one bill for introduction, this evening. That would be Bill 12-23, Current Expense Budget Retail Flexible Funding Model Grant.
Okay. Now we move on to Mr. Secretary, first item, please.
Yes, sir. First bill for final reading and vote, Mr. Chairman, is Bill 7-23, Zoning Regulations, Accessory Apartments.
Mr. Hickey? How you doing, sir?
Evening, Mr. Chair, members of the council.
Even?
I am here again on behalf of the administration to present Council Bill 7-23, which addresses limitations with the county's existing statute related to accessory apartments, also known as ADUs. Just a quick recap. The administration included this bill in its first housing package because we believe ADUs, properly utilized, play an important role in efforts to address a growing scarcity of housing for our residents, primarily seniors. ADUs are an effective tool for older adults looking to age in place, particularly for those who cannot afford to maintain their existing home without support from their families. They also provide flexible living options for families who are still struggling to recover from the effects of the pandemic. Excuse me. Even a slight increase in the use of ADUs for these and similar purposes can help in the larger housing effort by taking some of the pressure off of a limited rental market where seniors are often forced to compete with working families for affordable units. The proposed changes in the legislation would remove impractical barriers included in our existing ADU law, eliminating provisions that force homeowners to distinguish, say, between a grandchild and a niece or nephew, or bar family members living on the property from making a financial contribution to the operation of the household. We appreciate the robust conversation that has occurred regarding this legislation. Following conversations with the council, the administration has prepared amendments with two components. First, the amendment would change the maximum square footage allowed for a detached ADU based on lot size. Current law allows detached ADUs to be up to 1,200 square feet. The amendment would lower that maximum to 800 square feet for lots less than 1 acre. The maximum for lots over an acre would remain at the existing 1,200 square feet. Keep in mind that in addition to these maximum size allowances, detached ADUs are and will remain subject to the existing limitations placed on all accessory buildings in single-family dwelling zones, which can only be in a property's rear yard, must only occupy 40% or less of that rear yard, cannot exceed 15 feet in height, along with further conditions detailed in Section 400 of the zoning regulations. Second, the amendment adds a reporting requirement. Within 60 days following the end of each fiscal year, PAI must submit an annual report to the council and to the county executive that contains the following information. 1, the number of new applications for accessory apartments submitted. 2, the number of new approved accessory apartment applications. 3, the approximate location of each new approved accessory apartment by council district and zip code. 4, the number of new approved accessory apartments within an existing single-family dwelling. Those would be the attached units. 5, the number of new approved accessory apartments on the same owner-occupied property as the principal single-family dwelling. Those would be the detached, so reporting out on the number of both individually. And finally, the square footage of each new approved accessory apartment. The administration believes these amendments speak to concerns about large detached ADUs potentially being squeezed onto smaller lots and provides a transparent mechanism for annual reporting of PAI's tracking of ADUs. The administration would respectfully request the council to refrain from approving additional amendments that would affect the integrity of the bills. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to take any other questions at this time.
Any questions or comments from the members? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hickey. I guess we will now go down the amendments, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the First Amendment under consideration is offered by Councilman Ertel. Councilman Ertel's amendments, I believe the administration's largely piggyback the amendments that Councilman Ertel has previously circulated. And specifically, Mr. Ertel's amendment would, again, would essentially mirror the administration's amendment in the First Amendment, in which it would parse out the size of the separate accessory apartment, 1,200 square feet if located on a lot 1 acre or greater, and 800 square feet if located on a lot less than 1 acre, with keeping the provision also that the accessory building continue to have to comply with the requirements of Section 400 for accessory structures in general. The second would be the reporting requirement that Mr. Hickey mentioned. Mr. Ertel's amendment would require also within 60 days of the end of the fiscal year and each year thereafter, a yearly reporting requirement that would report to the county council the following. 1, the number of new applications for accessory apartments submitted during the previous year's period, organized by whether the application is for an interior detached accessory apartment. 2, the approximate location by council district and zip code and proposed square footage of each new accessory apartment for which an application is submitted. 3, the category of familial relation and whether the accessory apartment is provided with or without compensation. 4, the number of special hearings that occur during the previous year's period and the results of each special hearing, which is required for a detached accessory apartment. 5, if a building permit is issued for an accessory apartment during the previous year's period, the date the initial application was received, and any substantial differences between the initial application and the final approved permit. And finally, 6, the number of applications for renewal of a use permit approved during the previous year's period, whether there was a substantial change from the initial approval, and the approximate location by council district and zip code of the accessory apartment for which the use permit renewal is approved. And that would be, and then finally, Mr. Ertel would also have an amendment to include uncodified whereas clauses at the beginning of the bill that would state the following. Whereas it is not the intent of this act to dramatically increase the number or density of accessory apartments in the county, and whereas it is not the intent of this act to permit non-family members of the principal owner-occupied residence to reside in accessory apartments, and whereas it is not presently ascertainable whether the changes to the accessory apartment regulation set forth in this act will lead to a dramatic increase in the number of accessory apartments or a proliferation of non-family renters residing in accessory apartments, and whereas in order to assess the effectiveness of this act amid the resulting changes to the accessory apartments regulation, the council finds it is prudent to monitor a preliminary implementation phase over three years, after which the council may assess the impact of this act now therefore, and then it goes into the bill. So that is Mr. Ertel's amendments.
Any questions or comments on or discussion on the amendments? Everybody good?
Can I ask a question?
Sir?
Mr. Hickey, what is the administration's position on the amendment, those amendments.
Sure, I think the administration had been clear that it was in support of the amendments that had already been offered, the ones I went through in my testimony. Anything outside of that, I don't believe the administration would support. Some, I don't understand the whereas clause piece in its relation to the actual bill if it has no effect, particularly the discussion of the sunset period. But we would at least, just to be direct, the application for ADUs, the declaration would include the familial relationship. I'm not sure of the use of a cousin versus a grandchild, but that information at least is there. I think there's a very strong concern. Compensation is not rent. Most of these will not be landlord-tenant relationships on purpose. These are meant to support families, not create new landlord opportunities. So compensation could take the form of many things, and compensation can come and go. I helped with the groceries this month. I helped pay the light bill. So to measure whether compensation or not, to ask someone whether that would be a part of it, it could change. It would be very difficult to report on. This is to protect families from taking resources from their family members, which is why we brought this in the first place. So I think that would be a very difficult one to measure and report on by the very nature of compensation itself.
But I mean, number one, just to be clear, there was no sunset there. That
I
was
just
an
wanted to
evaluation.
understand, yeah,
And then number two, they can do that now, right?
what's that, sir?
They can do that now, help with the groceries, cut their lawn, cut the grass, do the laundry, they could do all that stuff now.
If there was actual money changing hands, I gave you money to pay the groceries or a bill, there's a strong argument that's compensation and would currently be illegal under the law.
Right, and that's what we're changing.
Right, but we wouldn't know, it would be hard to measure is my only point. It's not recorded up front.
Hard
in any
to accurately
particular way.
measure.
And
A
Director
person
Hickey,
could disclose it.
Sure.
Chair, can I? when
Yeah,
you- if
After
you're
you're
ready.
done.
Director Hickey, so what we're looking for here is on new applications, there's a checkbox whether you're charging rent or not. Now, if you're not gonna, if you're gonna be trading groceries or I'm gonna give you a car for your ADU that you build me, well, then that's not rent. But if you're charging, if your intention is to, I'm gonna charge you $1,200 a month, we'd like to know that.
So I would defer to the county attorney on the impact of that on the law. I can only say that most of these would not necessarily involve formal landlord-tenant relationships by the very nature of it being limited to family. And it just leaves itself open for a lot of confusion on what people are committing to or not. That's the opinion, that it would be hard to record and to report on.
Okay,
I just don't know why there's not a checkbox on a new application. Once we pass this, are you charging rent or you're not? Yes or no?
If my granddaughter's moving in, staying with me and helping support the family, what would be the legal definition of rent that I'd be charging? I don't
think
have
we're
a
throwing
lease.
anybody in jail here. I mean, they get.
It's asking them to make a judgment based on a definition of what rent is. It opens up a whole slew of potential confusion for families, I believe.
It's the county attorney.
What's the question? Repeat the question for me, please. Well, I guess you would have to look at what the common everyday definition of rent or compensation is. And that's something I'm happy to be able to give this body. But I guess my question is, with that, what is, if you look at the common everyday definition of rent or compensation, what is it that you want to
I guess,
the question as far as relating to what is it that you want information as far as what that definition, you just want to know what the definition is?
I guess the question is it monetary or a form of bartering? I don't know. I'm not an attorney. Specific, but just throwing it out there.
Well, I'm happy to share what the common, everyday definition of rent or compensation is. And if you bear with me, I can give that to you.
I've been living long enough to know what rent is. And any additional questions or
Paper more?
comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This is, the point seems to be an odd one. If I use my own situation, my son, who is related to me, lives on the floor of the house when he's not in college. He doesn't get charged any rent, but if I ask him to mow the lawn or do something like that, would that be in effect rent? And I don't think it's rent. And if I were to be asked, does he, and if, let's suppose that floor of the house is an ADU. And they're doing chores or anything. That's not rent to me. Rent is an actual payment. And I don't see why we're quibbling over what a chore and rent and whether the legal definition of rent and a chore, if you're a family member, you do chores sometimes. And sometimes you do pay rent. Maybe you have a family member, but it's an actual payment of a check, a money order, cash. And
Well, just so,
I just don't understand what was.
I think we're like
talking.
splitting hairs because I'm just going to say this and then we're going to move on. We're splitting hairs. If the agreement is, if there is an agreement, you can stay here in exchange for A, B, C, D. Then you can probably consider A, B, C, D as rent, whatever A, B, C, D is. Normally it's cash or some denomination of currency, but if the agreement is you can stay here in exchange for A, B, C, D, that's a classic quid pro quo. That's clearly a contract, verbal or otherwise, as to the compensation you want in exchange for them to stay there. Anything else, cutting the grass as a favor, picking up the groceries as a favor, cleaning the house as a favor, or as an obligation, that's not rent. But I think we're like, we're going down some road we don't need to go down.
understood, but if I may,
Sure.
rent is defined as a tenant's regular payment to a landlord for the use of property or land. And then it goes into money being paid for the use of property. That's the general definition for rent. So what you're saying as far as payment for mowing the grass, I don't think that would be considered rent based upon this common ordinary definition of the term.
Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, no one, if somebody makes an error on the form, we're not going to throw them in jail. What, are there any additional questions or comments on this amendment? Mr. Second, is there a motion to approve the amendment?
I'll motion to approve it.
Is there a second? I'll second it. It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Secretary, call the roll on the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, sorry. There were three amendments read. What are we?
Yes, it was one block of, it was one amendment with three components. Do you want me to separate them?
Preferably, only because you had mentioned that there were three pieces written. I thought we were voting on three different amendments. That was my understanding.
Confused. Okay. The first amendment then is to allow an accessory apartment not to exceed 1,200 square feet if located on a lot 1 acre or greater, and 800 square feet if located on a lot less than 1 acre.
Discussion on the amendment? Is there a motion to approve the amendment?
Motion.
Second.
To approve. It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Secretary, call the roll.
Mr. Ertel,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Crandall,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Patoka,
Aye.
Mr. Catch,
Aye.
Mr. Marks.
Aye.
Ayes have it. The First Amendment is approved. Next amendment, Mr. Secretary.
And then the next amendment, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Young, is the reporting component. And this second amendment that Mr. Ertel is offering would require within 60 days of the end of the fiscal year and each year thereafter, a report generated by the Department of Permits, Approvals, and Inspections to the county council and the county executive that includes, one, the number of new applications for accessory apartments submitted during the previous one-year period, organized by whether the application is for an interior or detached apartment. Two, the approximate location by council district and zip code and proposed square footage of each new accessory apartment for which an application is submitted. Three, the category of familial relation and whether the accessory apartment will be provided with or without, and I discussed this with Mr. Ertel, with or without monetary rent compensation. Is that okay, Mr. Ertel? For the number of special hearings which are required for a detached structure, the number of special hearings that occurred during the previous year's period and the result of each hearing. Five, if a building permit was issued for an accessory apartment, detached accessory apartment during the previous year's period, the date of the initial application and any substantial differences between the initial application and the final approved permit. And six, the number of applications for renewal of a use permit approved during the previous year's period, whether there was a substantial change from the initial approval, and the approximate location by council district and zip code of the accessory apartment for which the use renewal was approved.
Discussions and questions on the amendment? Is there a motion to approve the amendment?
I'll motion to approve it.
Sure. Is there a second? I'll second it. Okay, seconded by Councilman Crandall. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Ertel,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Crandall,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Catch,
Aye.
Mr. Patoka,
Aye.
Mr. Young.
No.
The ayes have it on the reporting. Next amendment, Mr. Secretary.
And the third is the whereas clauses. It's uncodified language in the bill. And the whereas clauses would state as follows: whereas it is not the intent of this act to dramatically increase the number or density of accessory apartments in the county, and whereas it is not the intent of this act to permit non-family members of the principal owner occupied residence to reside in accessory apartments, and whereas it is not presently ascertainable whether the changes to the accessory apartment regulation set forth in this act will lead to a dramatic increase in the number of accessory apartments or a proliferation of non-family renters residing in accessory apartments, and whereas in order to assess the effectiveness of this act amid the resulting changes to the county's accessory apartments regulation, the council finds it prudent to monitor a preliminary implementation phase over a 3-year period, after which the council may assess the impact of this act. And then that is all. There is no other uncodified language such as a sunset or period.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion on the amendment? Is there a motion to approve the amendment?
I'll motion to approve it.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll on the amendment.
Mr. Ertel,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Catch,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Patoka,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Crandall.
Aye.
Ayes have it. The amendment is passed. Are there any questions or conversations or discussion on Bill 7-23 as amended?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
yeah, thank you very much. I have grave concern in regard to this legislation. 60% of 1.6 million people in the Baltimore metropolitan area drink the water that comes from the reservoirs in northern Baltimore County. the reservoirs, each one of them has at least 2 contaminants that are well above what's called the safe level or considered the safe level. The community groups in northern Baltimore County, the Sparks Glencoe group and the North County group have been working hard in order to preserve land in northern Baltimore County so that we don't have more building, which brings about more septic systems, which have a tendency to pollute our streams, which run into the reservoirs, causing problems, and end up with trees gone in order to construct additional houses. At one time, northern Baltimore County had over 10,000 building lots. Today, it's around 3,000. And this has been done in order to reduce the possibility of pollution and to save our public water supply from contamination. And I believe that this particular bill, which is opposed by the 2 community groups that I've just mentioned, will simply add to our problems with additional septic systems, with trees being removed, which is why I really don't think that this particular bill should be in effect for areas above the Erdl, because that is a very sensitive area. Now, in the rest of Baltimore County, the suburban part, it's not going to have that environmental problem because most of these areas are on public water and sewerage. So you're not going to have the problems that you have in northern Baltimore County. So this is the reason I am not going to vote for the bill. If you take a look at my record as a council member with the rezoning that I've approved and not approved, you'll see that I've taken very seriously the need to preserve North County for environmental reasons. If you are on public water today, the taste is not the same anymore. And that's because it's full of chemicals, because the chemicals are there to kill the substances that are in the water that are damaging to your health. Did you know that taking a shower with this water, 97% of the contaminants in the water go into your body? They're absorbed by the skin and go into your body. So it's a problem. And in our district in northern Baltimore County, we're doing everything we can to keep our water clean for the 960,000 people that drink the water that comes out of northern Baltimore County. So I can't vote for this bill for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Katz. We certainly appreciate your advocacy and your comments. Yes, Councilman Crandall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will also not be voting for this bill for a few different reasons. And I'll just lay out one of them is, we take a lot of care every 4 years. The planning board, the planning department takes a lot of care and a lot of time every 4 years to ensure that parcels in Baltimore County are zoned a particular way. And I feel that this bill is a subversion of our zoning classifications. Zoning classifications spell out, this is the amount of dwelling units allowed in a particular area on a particular parcel. And this is an erosion of our land use authority on the Baltimore County Council. So that's why one of the reasons I will be voting against this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Crandall. Any additional questions or comments? I will just say for myself, this is a very difficult issue, believe it or not, because having heard everything my colleagues have said, I certainly can agree with everything you both said. Personally, I understand there's a reason why we have zoning, and it sort of stuck with me when somebody said, well, DR 3.5 can possibly become DR something else. So I can certainly appreciate that. And that's why I, was very happy to hear the amendments in terms of the reporting requirements. So that if we see a hard right turn or hard left turn or hard change, we will have an opportunity to make adjustments. At the same time, I look at that and I compare it to, believe it or not, property rights, right? I mean, like when people own their property, I like to give them a certain amount of leeway. I certainly care about housing family members who may otherwise not have a place to stay. So in weighing all of these things together, I've come to the conclusion that with the amendments, with the administration's insistence that they're going to work very hard to police this, with our ability to look at the reporting requirements and see where we're going, because I don't think it'll turn overnight. And if it does make some drastic changes, we always have the ability to stand here and stop it cold in its track, other than whatever's in the pipeline. So for those reasons, that even though it is very difficult, because even though I do care about the zoning, I do care about property rights, I do care about housing people, I'm going to vote for the bill tonight as amended. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, just want to clarify, are we on the bill now?
We're on the
Because
bill.
okay, just,
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Young. We do have a little bit of business before that to take care of,
Okay.
if I may. Mr. Catch was, I think, considering an amendment that had to do with cover. Okay. So, but then there is the administration's amendments that are being offered that I think need to be parsed through.
Isn't it true that their amendments have been rolled into the amendments that Councilman Ertel put in, with the exception of one part on compensation?
Well, Mr. Ertel's, yes and no. Mr. Ertel's amendment regarding the size of the accessory apartment is exactly as the administration's. So perhaps they would be willing to pull that one back. Mr. Ertel's amendment to have a reporting requirement based on Mr. Ertel's desires of what those of what that should be varies a little bit from the administration's, in addition to the compensation or rent issue. So they may wish to have a vote on that. I don't know, because
Well, let's just, you're going to have a vote on it, even though we've already done more.
I think at this point, we should move forward.
Okay.
with the amendments or move, okay. So if there is a motion and a second on the administration's amendment regarding their reporting, as Mr. Hickey read it, then you can take a vote on that. And if you vote to approve that, I believe it would supersede the vote you just took on Mr. Ertel's.
Have they been introduced?
Not yet. It
formally?
would take a motion and a second.
Someone would have to introduce them.
I'm getting an indication he has no interest in moving forward with any of the amendment.
Okay.
No,
Oh,
sir.
okay. When you said move forward, I didn't know whether you
No,
meant-
as we stood.
Okay.
Yep.
So
I'm
on,
sorry.
on the floor, we have discussion and conversation on the bill as amended.
Yes, so now that we've taken care of that, then yes, Mr. Young, the discussion is on the bill as amended.
Any questions or comments? Okay. Is there a motion to approve Bill 7-23 as amended?
Move the bill as amended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Can I make a comment?
Yep.
Mr. Jones?
Yes, comment from Councilman.
Yeah, I too am conflicted about this bill. Number one, this should have gone through the planning board. Okay, and that's the mechanism that I used on the townhouse lot width. I thought that was a good advisory opinion, and it helped get us to a final bill. Number two, when rezoning, I think that is a concern. I think I hold the record for downzoning the most property in Baltimore County. On the other hand, I do recognize the fact that we have 25% of our county population that is senior citizen. And we need to be encouraging more housing for those type of residents. So those are my thoughts. I would just encourage everyone on complex issues like this to use the planning board because they are sharp minds who can be very helpful to us.
Any additional comments? It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Ertel,
Aye.
Mr. Crandall,
No.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Patoka,
Aye.
Mr. Catch.
No.
The ayes have it. Bill 7-23 as amended has passed. Mr. Secretary, next bill, please.
Next, Mr. Chairman, is Bill 8-23, Executive Compensation Plan for Employees in the Exempt Service.
Okay, Ms. Rogers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. Good evening. I'm pleased to present on behalf of the county executive, Bill 8-23. The bill is proposed has the following purposes. The bill creates an executive compensation plan for employees in the exempt service as required by the county charter per bill number 17-18, passed in 2018. Charter provision 505 was amended to require that officers and employees in the exempt service as defined by Charter Section 801 have their compensation determined by a compensation plan recommended by the county executive and adopted by the county council. This bill satisfies that requirement. The bill provides for the discretionary granting of permission leave with pay for senior executive county employees. This codifies the interim transition policy for senior executives exiting from county employment, which I approved on July 25th, 2022, in concurrence with the county executive. I want to thank Mr. Bostwick and Ms. Melkinson for working closely with us as we worked through the provisions of this proposed legislation. I'd also like to add that the proposed recommended compensation plan encompasses all of the positions reflected in Section 801 and defined as exempt service. All subsections of Section 801 deemed as appropriate for inclusion are addressed by specific subsections of Section 801. While the legislation requires a recommended compensation plan for all of the positions of the exempt service, some of the positions are governed by other provisions of the county charter or state statutes. In compliance with the legislation, the compensation plan recommended have been provided and will also be shared with the appropriate decision-making authority. Those include the county executive. The salary is set by the county council pursuant to Charter Article 4, Section 405. County council members, salaries recommended by the PSAB pursuant to state and county law. The county sheriff, state law dictates that the sheriff's salary be designated by Maryland Code the judicial proceedings provision 2-317, and the state's attorney. State law dictates that the state's attorney's salary be governed by Maryland Constitution, Article 5 and 9, and Maryland Criminal Procedures Code 15-404. This information will be shared with the state for their consideration. Be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Any questions or comments from the members?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question with a part-time individual. If I were to hire somebody, let's say for 2 months, to do a project, let's say regarding school redistricting, let's say, in the district, and I wanted to pay them $5,000 for the 2 months' work, I would not be able to do that with this salary scale?
A part-time employee who is, if they're in the exempt service, if that position is defined within the charter in Section 801, which your employees of the council are, the compensation would be governed by the compensation levels that are reflected in the proposed compensation plan.
So I would have to pay that person, was it $10,000 for something that's worth $5,000?
Well,
That's yearly.
Yeah.
10,000 is yearly.
right, but if you hire the person for only 2 months,
Right.
you wouldn't pay the person the full salary.
Right.
Salaries are paid on a biweekly basis based on a unit cost.
So it's a situation where if you take, well, whatever the 5,000 would be for the 2 months, you could pay that person bi-weekly and it would be legal. Because
sir,
as the councilman said, this is for a yearly salary of 10,000.
Correct. What's reflected is an annualized salary, and
Right.
as all employees are paid, everyone has a pay rate.
Right.
The rate dictates, and this is what this part of this project in terms of compensation. This was required by the 2018 legislation passed, and then, of course, the referendum. But it sets forth a scale by which individuals are to be compensated. The scale was developed by a national HR firm that has done many of the classification and compensation studies in our region. And so the scale is set forth. This was set forth a new scale by which we would consider compensating employees who are governed by Section 801 of the Charter.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that this person wouldn't end up with 10,000.
No, sir.
Yeah, then that's fine. Thank you.
We pay people on an hourly rate based on numbers of hours worked.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments before we get into the amendments? Mr. Secretary, I understand there are some amendments to this.
Yes, sir.
bill.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. There are amendments that I believe Mr. Chairman is offering, and there are also amendments that the administration is offering. How would you like to proceed?
Let's go with the amendments from the administration first.
Yes, sir.
Unless
The-
you're thinking they're contradict. Do they
No, no,
No,
sir.
sir. More technical in nature.
Yes. So the administration's amendments, first, there are 4 categories that were in the executive narrative as well as the consultant's report that were just not in the bill. The chief of police, the fire chief, the county health officer / director of DHHS, and the director of public works and transportation. So those positions are being properly put into the bill. The range for the chief of police would be 192 to 288. Same for the fire chief, and I'm talking thousands. The health officer range would be 176 to 264, and the range for the director of DPWNT would be 163 to 244, 500. Secondly, there was an issue that came up regarding IT consulting services, which is a separate position listed in the bill. It had an hourly minimum of $780 and a maximum of $1,056. This was found to be an error. Again, there was confusion, I think, over the consultant's characterization. I don't know if you want to add to that, Ms. Rogers, or.
Yes, sir. I'm happy to. When the calculation was done, it was based on the full amount of contracts that we currently have in place and divided. The methodology by which the staff came up with a unit cost was inaccurate. The unit cost should not have been divided by the cost of the salaries, but the range by which positions are compensated. Subsequently, we were able to get a summary of all of the IT positions and what they're compensated, and clearly they are not compensated at the level that was reflected in the original draft of the bill. And I want to thank Councilmember Young for flagging this for us, because when we first looked at it, we're like, okay, IT is expensive, but it was totally out of sync with other jurisdictions, and we caused us to go back and really understand the methodology by which the hourly rates were derived, and it was inaccurate the way they were derived.
Thank you. And so the range would instead be $75 at the minimum per hour to up till $575 an hour in the maximum. That would be the range for IT consulting services. And then another technical amendment, the county attorney's maximum would, instead of 325, is 325.5. And then on page 5 of the bill, where it references, this is actually a county council position that was sort of flagged. It is temp support to, parentheses, employee of the county council. This was one that we identified had only been used once in all the years, and we realized with the addition of other positions is no longer really valid. So this is being deleted out of the bill. And then finally, on page 6 of the bill, there is a provision that states that as of the end of each calendar year, commencing with the year ending December 31, 2023, the annual increase in the consumer price index shall be identified and determined. The minimum and maximum compensation rates for attorney consulting fee, as indicated in the chart in subsection A of this section, shall be increased by an amount equal to the annual increase in the consumer price index. The increase is calculated shall take effect July 1, 2024 and July 1 each year thereafter. Ms. Rogers pointed out to me when we were discussing this that pursuant to 801.5 of the charter, which is more expansive than just attorney consulting fee, that all professional consultants performing temporary or part-time services pursuant to Section 801 subparagraph 5 of the charter should be included in this CPI subsection. So the amendment would strike attorney consulting fee and substitute professional consultants performing temporary or part-time services pursuant to Section 801.5 of the charter, which mirrors the 801 language, the 801.5 language. So those are the amendments that the administration, I believe, is putting forth.
Thank you. Questions or discussion on the amendment? All of that is one amendment, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion to approve the amendment?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Patoka,
Aye.
Mr. Catch.
Aye.
Mr. Marks.
Aye.
Mr. Ertel.
Aye.
Mr. Crandall.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The amendment is approved. Next amendment, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The next amendment is offered by Council Chairman Jones. This amendment would strike the reference on page 3, line 18 of the bill that references the Police Accountability Board, the member Police Accountability Board, and the minimum and maximum range. That is one component. And then the second component would essentially under legislative aid, it would create 2 levels of legislative aid, a legislative aid 1 and a legislative aid 2. The range for a legislative aid 1 would be 35 to 67.5, and the range for a legislative aid 2, meaning Roman numeral 2, would be 65 to 97.5. And then it would also specifically clarify a third category of legislative aid being the part-time or temporary that Mr. Catch alluded to. This was already in the bill, but we just moved it and reconstituted it. And it would have the same 10,000 to 55,500 range, 55,500 range, which is again a yearly salary range. So that is the sum and and then no, yep, that's it. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, so I will just give a little brief explanation. I mean, as it relates to the Police Accountability Board, I certainly don't have anything against the Police Accountability Board, but to be absolutely clear, it was probably less than 6 months ago when we took up the legislation concerning the Police Accountability Board. And we as a body decided that we were not going to compensate the Police Accountability Board, particularly because there was other people that were working probably just as hard, if not longer. And I can't think of one that works harder than like the Planning Board that currently receives no compensation. So if the administration wants to take a look at a plan to compensate all those other people, then I'll be more than happy to take a look at it. But right now, I guess don't see no reason why we should come back and compensate the Police Accountability Board when we specifically said we weren't going to do it less than 6 months ago, if my memory serves me correct. Now, at the other amendment basically gives us a range, expands our range. Mainly, if anything, it lowers our range some so that we have the ability to hire people and not have to pay exorbitant salaries for work that, you know, maybe a new entry-level person or what have you. So by splitting that up, it creates a higher scale, if you will. Everybody's not bunched up and you don't have salary compression. You can sort of spread it out a little bit. So any questions or comments on the amendments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
will the secretary please read the 2 amendments?
Yes, sir. The first amendment, again, would remove the position in the bill of Police Accountability Board member, as well as the range, the salary, minimum, maximum. And then the second would create 2 categories of legislative aid, 2 payment categories for compensation. Legislative aid, Roman numeral 1, would have a range of 35,000 to 67,500. Legislative aid, Roman numeral 2, would have a range of 65 to 97.5. And then there would be a third legislative aid, parentheses, part-time or temporary, that would maintain the range of 10,000 to 55,500.
Didn't we just vote on the 65 to 97.5?
I don't think so. We still have the part-time. position that you talked about.
Right, right.
And this here would expand the range, and so that we don't have salary compression on our staff.
I thought we did legislative assistant, Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2.
That is already in the bill, that was in the bill as introduced. Legislative assistant is part of the central staff. Legislative aid is part of your individual staff.
Gotcha. Okay.
But actually, that's a good example because we are
I see.
kind of taking a page out of that book and extending it to legislative aids as well.
So we have legislative aid 1, which is 65 to 97.5. And now we're creating, well, that becomes 2, and then 1 is the lower. Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Any additional, yes, Ms. Rogers?
Chairman, I would note that there are some other boards in the legislature that are compensated, but I most definitely will take back to the county executive your position with respect to the other boards and commissions. As a matter of fact, the county executive and executive staff, he has charged us to look at boards and commissions because it is consistent with the PAB. The other jurisdictions and during benchmarking that they were provided with some minimal compensation, but we are definitely more than willing to look at other boards and commissions as well. But there are a number that I said at the work session that are reflected in the bill.
If somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, these boards and commissions are in statute where they call for or require that they have a compensation. The Police Accountability Board is not.
Okay. But I just wanted to note for the record that the county executive has articulated his willingness and desire to have us look at other boards.
Yeah, I'd support it. I think it's a good idea. I know we have people, and we certainly appreciate people who come forward every day and volunteer their time and work on these boards and commissions. And, we have to recognize that, when they take time away to come here and do this job, the opportunity cost is they could be doing something else. Maybe driving an Uber or whatever else they could be doing to make money. And in many cases, they spend their money and their time to come here and volunteer. So I'm okay with compensation. I just want to make sure we're doing it fairly and equally across the board. And I don't want to leave out people that I know we've charged the planning board with an awful lot of things over the years. And I know they work extremely hard. And I guess want to make sure that we don't forget about them
Yes, sir.
as one example.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you saying that since when we passed the law about the Police Accountability Board, that there's no compensation in that we can't pay the 4,000 anyhow? In other words, so we can't pay it because the law does not provide for it, correct?
Per the amendment,
Say that again?
per the amendment, that it's striking the compensation for the PAB.
No, what I meant is the original bill doesn't have any mention of compensation. So that would have to be changed in order to pay compensation to the members. Is that true or not?
Would you like me to answer that, Mr. Catch, or?
You know how? Sure. No, I'm only kidding.
I would defer to the county attorney because obviously the county attorney has the last word, but my view would be if it's not in the law, they could not just be done. There is a provision in the law that allows the county executive or gives the county executive authority to propose a budget for the PAB, but it does not provide for compensation as other boards and commissions do.
I would concur with
Okay.
Mr. Rowe.
So the chairman is indeed correct to eliminate this category because it can't be paid anyhow.
I would not take a position on that because that's more of a policy decision.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
but I just want to be clear on what I'm hearing you state with respect to taking a broader look at other boards and commissions, which would then include the PAB?
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
if my memory serves me correct, then I would urge any of the members who feel like they want to weigh in, please do so. Part of the conversation that we had was what was the jobs that others were doing in the county that were not receiving compensation? And should we then give them compensation and not give the others? So at that time, one of the biggest ones that come to my mind was like, the biggest example was the planning board. So we decided at that time, no, we were not going to give a compensation to the police accountability board because there was others that were working hard for the county that was receiving nothing. And these others, by the way, have been doing that for years, years. And we weren't going to start giving somebody else something that we weren't going to give to the others. So my position, I can't speak for everybody, is that if the administration so desire to review all of these boards and commissions and decide which ones you want to give recommendations to, I'm not opposed to it. I'm not here to take anything from anybody.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Most certainly, we'll take that back as an action item and follow up.
Councilman Cranston.
Sure, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that your recollection of our conversation 6 or so months ago regarding compensation for PAB, my recollection is the same as yours. I believe that you're accurate.
Thanks, sir.
I must have missed that meeting. I was just sitting
Well,
here.
there was our meeting when we discussed it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I share your concern. I will say that people choose to serve on boards and commissions as part of their civic duty. But I do think when we start to look at compensating one board, we need to look at equity across the board, a different kind of board, I mean. And the planning board, for example, is a really good example, Mr. Chair. Beginning in August, they're going to spend the next year, the next 13 months, looking at the CZMP, traveling across all 7 districts, assessing hundreds of zoning issues, and their compensation will be a meal and perhaps parking in Towson. And it doesn't seem equitable in terms of what they're asked to do. Then they're making really important land use decisions. The Police Accountability Board will be making important decisions as well related to law enforcement. Our school board makes incredibly important decisions about our children and our elected. And I know this is a little different, but I do want to make the point that their compensation is zero, I believe, it is.
It's 11,000.
For school board members?
Yeah.
I stand corrected.
They deserve more, trust me.
Yes, and 11,000 is more of a stipend than actually a salary for the work that they do. But I think it'd be interesting to not only to conduct that analysis, but to do it in a way that we can see it so that we all are aware, because I was unaware that the school board was had some level of compensation.
We'll definitely put it on the to-do list.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions or comments? Mr. Secretary, I will move the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Catch.
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Patoka,
Aye.
Mr. Crandall,
Aye.
Mr. Ertel,
Aye.
Mr. Marks.
Aye.
Ayes have it, the amendment is passed. Mr. Secretary, any additional amendments?
There are no additional amendments.
Any questions or conversation or discussion on the bill 8-23 as amended?
Move.
It's been moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll on Bill 8-23 as amended.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Catch?
Aye.
Mr. Patoka?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Mr. Crandall?
Aye.
Mr. Ertel?
Aye.
Ayes have it, Bill 8-23 as amended has passed. Mr. Secretary, next bill, please.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Sure.
Next, Mr. Chairman, is Bill 9-23. This bill is sponsored by Council Members Patoka and Catch. Zoning regulations, uses permitted in the manufacturing light zone, veterinarian's office in a planned industrial park.
Councilman Patoka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bill 923 amends permitted uses for veterinarian's office in certain areas of the ML zone. It expands it, and it'll expand it in business areas that are located. This one is specific to the Bear Hills Planned Industrial Park, and it's been supported by the Ruxton, Riderwood, Lake Roland Area Improvement Association, the RRLRAIA. I just like saying that. And I think this is something that all pet owners, it's important to have accessibilities to veterinary, especially urgent veterinary care, and this allows for that. Thank you, Councilman Catch, for co-sponsoring. I thought there might be one more co-sponsor.
Yeah, I'll go on as a coach. You'll have me.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yes. Yes, I will, Councilman Ertel. So,
Okay, Councilman Catch.
I last year had put a similar bill in for Loveton Industrial Park to allow this veterinary facility. So simply an amendment to it.
yes.
Councilman Ertel.
I'm just giving support to my bordering council person and bordering neighborhood.
Okay. And I'm going to give support to the veterinarian and the gentleman who spoke the other day. So I'll go on as a co-sponsor as well.
Yes,
Any
sir.
additional?
I have duly noted Mr. Ertel's support of a neighboring council member. I'm filing that one away.
Okay. He's your neighbor too. Any questions or comments from the members? Mr. Secretary, no, is there a motion to approve
So
bill? It's been moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll on Bill 9-23.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Patoka?
Aye.
Mr. Catch?
Aye.
Mr. Ertel?
Aye.
Mr. Crandall?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ayes have it, Bill 9-23 is passed. The council will now consider our miscellaneous matters. Extensive testimony was taken at the council's work session on February 28th. The witnesses who testified at the work session is available to restate their testimony if needed. I'll now call upon the secretary to read the cover letter for fiscal matters 1 through 7.
Mr. Chairman, fiscal matter 1 was withdrawn prior to this evening's meeting. Fiscal matter 2 is a contract of sale with Dogwood Resources LLC as part of a program open space acquisition. Fiscal matter 3 is an amendment to contract with Pro Bono Resource Center of Maryland Incorporated related to eviction prevention and housing stability, legal services. Fiscal matter 4 is an amendment to contract with St. Ambrose Housing Aid Center Incorporated for the same eviction prevention and housing stability legal services. Fiscal matter 5 is a contract with William C. Rubin to assist the Department of Housing and Community Development in the implementation of the countywide affordable, fair, and equitable housing development and preservation strategy. And fiscal matter 5 is 5 contracts for in-service training courses for county employees. And finally, fiscal matter 7 is a contract for legal services with the firm of Cramon and Graham, PA.
Questions, conversations, discussion on the fiscal matters? Is there a motion to approve fiscal matters 2 through 7?
I'll move it.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and second. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll for fiscal matters 2 through 7.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Patoka,
Aye.
Mr. Catch,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Ertel,
Aye.
Mr. Crandall.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Fiscal matters 2 through 7 are approved. We'll now consider our miscellaneous business. Mr. Secretary, first item, please.
Mr. Chairman, there is no, and I can't remember the last time this happened, but there is no miscellaneous business before the council this evening.
Are there any further business to come before the council?
No, sir.
Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. The meeting is adjourned. Ms. Belcastro, do we have any speakers this evening?
No, Mr. Chairman, we do not have any registered speakers.
Okay, that'll do it tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. See you next time, same bat.